Hi friend, and welcome back to Marvelous Friends, your home for all things Marvel Cinematic Universe and beyond. I'm Rhett, and today I'm going to be talking about what I think the Disney Plus Loki series could look like and the plot that it will have. Roll that credit. During the Disney investors meeting, we received the first glimpse of what this particular Disney Plus franchise will look like. At this meeting, Kevin Feige was kind of talking about the series as a whole, and the Loki Plus series was used as the example that was displayed behind them. Now, this was just a tiny glimpse in a still image, but it kind of gave us a lot of context for us to go on here when developing theories about what the show can look like. Now, I will point out that this is going to be the first title franchise of a villain-focused storyline. Now, it is arguably true that Thanos was the true star of Infinity War. However, his name didn't land on the title, so the statement still stands that this Loki series is the first of that type. From this shown image, we do see a version of Loki that is not Tom Hiddleston. Now, Tom is confirmed for the series, and he is slated to be the main actor, so don't worry, we will be seeing him. But there is many theories out there, and this seems to maybe potentially confirm this, that he will not be the only version of Loki we will see, as he comes across other iterations of the character. Now, these could be Lokis from different dimensions, different Earth timelines, different just points in his own story. Any of those are possible right now, as we're really not sure how this multiverse and timeline disruption is going to affect the MCU moving forward. Many of those answers coming from the Spider-Man Far From Home film that is premiering this week. Now, I'm hoping that we will see quite a few of these. I think it'll be really fun to kind of get various versions of them. Kid Loki is one that a lot of people are pointing to as a theory to make an appearance, which we will get into in this video just a little bit more. And so this version of Tom could just be a production sample photo where they used a general model to stand in for Tom, who is too expensive to do one of these kind of just sample photos. And this is just used for production purposes as a sample of the direction for everyone and the creators to go in. Or this could potentially be another one of these versions of Loki that we will meet across this storyline. Based on everything we can see around Loki in this image, it is clear that it is taking place in the past. And by what we can see, we can get a pretty good idea of when exactly in the past it is. On the marquee of the movie theater in the background, we see the title Jaws. And that film premiered in 1975, so it's safe to say the TV run will take place in this time period, or at least a portion of it will, as I do believe that we'll actually see Loki jumping around into various plot points along this divergent timeline he created when he escaped with the Tesseract. As we know from the Ancient One and her conversation with Bruce Banner, aka Professor Hulk, in the film, whenever one of these stones are displaced in time, it creates a divergent timeline. And despite Captain America returning the version of the Space Stone that they used in the Endgame's final resolution, this removed in time Space Stone still creates a divergent timeline. So despite their best efforts, the damage has already been done. Now, it is uncertain what his plan will be, of course, for this time jumping, though I am sure the damage he's going to do to the timeline does not stop at him creating that divergent timeline in the first place. Now, he is the god of mischief, and so I expect to see just that, him going through and causing problems at various points in history, especially now that he's going to be far less opposed with the Avengers not being able to stop him, as they do not come into action much later, and perhaps we'll see some other versions of heroes that he will face off against at various times throughout history, allowing us to be introduced to some potential pop-up heroes for future Avengers things, as well as kind of give us some references to fun Marvel comic characters that perhaps many people have been wanting to see all along. Now, I know that Loki has received a lot of redemption and kind of turning around of the character in the back half of the saga that is the MCU. However, remember that the version of Loki that we'll be receiving for this series is making his escape past the events of just finishing his initial attempt at conquest of Earth at the Avengers Assemble film, the first Avengers film. So he has not yet received a lot of that story and redemption yet that we have seen. So he is truly, again, back at his evilest point in his storytelling. So he is definitely going to be up to no good in this series that we will see. However, the Space Stone does not grant the power of time travel, which raises the question then of how does Loki find himself in the past? Now, there is, of course, the theory that this series could run with some flashbacks where we see older versions of Loki, popping up at his various times on Earth, as after all, he is an Asgardian, and based upon what we know, that they appear much younger than they actually are, and that he is probably somewhere in the thousands plus range of actual age. Though I would say that this is probably not going to be the case, and that we are following the actual escaped Loki as he travels through time. But that means that we do have to figure out some kind of device for him to do so, as we haven't really seen time travel as a power set of his magic. And he has escaped much further in the past than when he would have known about the Tony Stark created time travel equipment. So how does he get there is something that we're really going to have to figure out. One option would be that when he made his escape with the Space Stone, when it caused this divergent timeline, it ripped not only a hole in space, but also in time, dislocating him not only where he is, but when he is as well. This kind of being a side effect, not necessarily an actual intended ability of the stone. Now, this could be why he looks to be looking around in the image that we saw at the investors meeting, and it is a very chaotic scene. Now, this would add to us as an audience kind of that feeling of chaos and not really knowing where, or in this case, when the character is, as he tries to kind of get his orientation to what's going on around him. So this could potentially be his initial landing in that time period, and then him going on from there to kind of create a foothold and really take advantage of the fact that there's not Avengers at this time. Now, of course, there are versions from the comic book where Loki actually does have the ability to kind of mess with time and space itself. We get this version from the Ultimate Marvel storyline where he actually is able to rearrange time as he so chooses and manipulate it thusly. Now, this could be potentially something we see with his powers taking a substantial leap, or because of maybe he figures out the actual Space Stone inside of it and fuses itself with his powers, much like we know is possible through Captain Marvel. His powers take a significant leap forward. However, I don't want to say that this is what we're going to see. We haven't really seen these kind of major jumps in people's powers in the storylines anywhere, and considering we're dealing with an older version of Loki who has had several interactions with the Tesseract and various stones over the course of the time from when this one displaces himself in time to what we have seen most recently with the Loki that dies in Infinity War, there's just major questions as to why all of a sudden that power surge would come in the past when we haven't seen it in the future. So I don't think this will be what we're seeing. Besides, like I said, this isn't something that's characteristically common within the MCU. Most characters kind of have their set power sets, and we see that perhaps maybe just a development in their level of control of their powers, but nothing that is like a major change to their power sets, and those being very consistent with each of their appearances. Another option for him to suddenly have this ability, and one that I think is highly likely for the character, is to do what Loki does best, and that is align him to a greater power that ultimately meets his end goal. Now, we've seen him do this a lot. He's aligned with various villains. He's aligned with Thanos actually twice, it turns out, as he tried to kind of pose as aligning with Thanos at the end to give him the Tesseract, though this was ultimately to try to betray him and take him down. We do see this to be very much so a character trait of him. Now, this would be a great place to introduce potentially Kong the Conqueror, someone that a lot of people have been hoping for to make an appearance in Phase 4, and with the ideas of time travel being such a major portion of this, and those divergent timelines most likely being a major part of the conflict of Phase 4, it makes sense that Kong would play a role some case. Now, this could be that when he senses the timeline disruption that he creates by leaving and escaping with the Space Stone, Kong seeks them out and turns him into a kind of time agent of sorts, and has him go out and create this mischief and disruption of the timeline that Kong so much likes, to allow him to take control and invade the current time in the future with our films. Now, I wouldn't say that we see a physical adaptation of him and the version that we will see in the films. It'll probably much more be done in references, or perhaps seeing a different version of Kong, as Kong has many different forms that happen in the various timelines of his lifespan, because he does take different forms in different times. So that would be something that would be really interesting to see, and it'd be a great way to give the fans what they want by introducing Kong. Another interesting thing that can be taken from this image is actually the logo we see for the series. Now, it has been said that this is very resemblant of the title and text that is used for the title of a comic run called Loki: Journey into Mystery. Now, I see the resemblance here, but I don't see it as a one-for-one match. Perhaps just the inspiration as a nod to the comic or something like that, but I don't see it being 100% copy like some people are saying, but we'll talk about the comic nonetheless. Now, in this story, of course, Thor is destined to save Midgard. However, he can only do so if he receives the help of Loki. This really dealing with the major kind of story of Loki's redemption. Again, this is something we have seen being told in the films, with each of his appearances in a film really marking him closer and closer on that storyline of redemption, and ultimately becoming the anti-hero that he really is in our last versions of him before his end in Infinity War. Now, again, the character and the version of Loki we're going to be seeing as our main hero is going to be happening before all this story arc, so we could really follow him kind of regain that redemption story in this series, which would align with the story of Loki, A Journey into Mystery. And I will also point out that Kid Loki is a major version of Loki that we see in this comic book as well, which only adds to that theory that we will see a version of Kid Loki make an appearance in this series run as well. What this hint of a story really could mean is that we see, again, like I mentioned, him having to go through this process of redeeming himself and him becoming the hero of his own story. Now, I do say that though this will be the first villain titled franchise, I don't think he will be the overall villain of the story, as we will see him eventually make that turn to hero, and him facing whatever force is either he aligned with to allow him to time travel, or perhaps whoever is manipulating or taking advantage of the time displacement and disruption that he caused when he made his escape. Him ultimately looking to undo those changes that he created and kind of take down this other villain. Now, who that could be, again, Kong would be a perfect fit for this, considering the time displacement is going to be a major aspect, I believe, of this show. But there are, of course, other villains that could potentially fill this role and take advantage of it that don't necessarily have to know about time travel or have that ability as their own right. It could be someone that he just encounters when he travels back in time due to that initial time rip. Now, as far as, again, like I said, we will have to see him redo this whole character development, but I do think it would be really great, and perhaps ultimately seeing him sacrifice himself to restart over. We know that Asgardians have the ability to reincarnate themselves if they die a heroic death. It's part of the whole Asgardian lore, so we could see him make this sacrifice, and this be where we introduce to some of those other iterations of the character, including Kid Loki, or perhaps even Lady Loki, which I think would be a fun character to see, and hopefully, if nothing else, we see him use his shapeshifting to become Lady Loki at some point in the series, because I believe that is someone that really should make an appearance in a Loki-focused franchise. I think the major reason why a lot of this kind of development will be able to happen in a much faster sequence of events within this series, rather than it's taken so long in the films, is the fact that Thor will not be present in this iteration of the storytelling. The catalyst that often causes him to revert back to his not-so-hero in his very mischievous ways in all the films. My main theory and thought about what this series will be is going to be very similar to several of the other franchises that are receiving solo projects finally after being part of the MCU for so long, and that is to mainly provide a goodbye for that character, this being the official farewell for Tom Hiddleston's Loki, and perhaps us receiving a new version for the MCU moving forward, this being either Lady Loki or more than likely Kid Loki to be the representation of that character we see in the MCU from here on out. It would also be a major part of setting up things that we will see in the MCU moving forward, whether this be other heroes, other characters, villains, themes, what have you. Much like, again, this will be what the Black Widow film of Phase 4 will be as well. A goodbye to Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow, as well as introducing to something that we really need to know about the MCU moving forward. Now, I do want to say that I believe that his reincarnation, due to whatever heroic act, will end the Tom Hiddleston's version's storyline, will ultimately probably be Kid Loki, because I do believe and strongly believe and hope that we are heading towards a Young Avengers Assemble moment within the MCU. And Kid Loki does play a role within that team. Now, as far as release date information goes on that, it's hard to tell for this particular series. We have already received quite a bit of information regarding WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, not only about production and casting, but kind of clues as to what those stories will look like long before we received this one for Loki. So this means that it'll probably be the last of the three to premiere. Now, we do know the Disney Plus platform is launching in November of this year, but we won't receive any of these new franchises in that initial launch, most of them coming probably early in the next spring, starting at the earliest. So this one will probably come mid to late 2020 if I had to guess at all. Now, I do anticipate this will be a 6-run episode series, just like we know that WandaVision will be, as we have received that confirmation from Olsen, and that all these franchises will probably run the same story. So this would kind of look then that Loki arrives in the timeline that he is displaced to, most likely this being 1975 in episode 1, and him getting used to these new surroundings. Perhaps in episode 2, finding out how to time travel and aligning himself with that greater power, with episode 3 and 4 following the mischief that he creates with this new ability and these instructions from this alignment. Now, ultimately, in episode 5, most likely we will see him start to realize what is going on and that he is really and truly the villain that he doesn't want to be, and we start to get that true redemption story, with episode 6 being the grand finale where he takes down this villain, or at least he believes, because I do believe if it is going to be Kong that he will get away in some way and pop up again in our current time with our current Avengers, learning from this experience with Loki. Now, this, of course, would be the ultimate act of sacrifice for Loki. Most likely, it would lead to that reincarnation to the version of Loki we'll have moving forward. Again, I do admit it will probably be Kid Loki. What are your thoughts about my thoughts regarding what this Loki series could look like? Do you agree, or would you like to see something potentially different from the show's run? Let me know down in those comments. Of course, as we receive more news and information and potential theories regarding this Disney Plus franchise and the others, I will of course be sharing that on here. I also will point out, make sure to follow me on Facebook, as I do post more regular news articles and stories on there. The link is down in the description to my Facebook. In the meantime, to make sure you don't miss anything here on the channel, make sure to subscribe and set your alerts. And if you liked this video and my theory, make sure to give me a thumbs up here as well. I do always appreciate it. And of course, until next time, I love you all 3000. I hope you have a marvelous rest of your day. Bye, friend.